We have an executive order for your attention on the very important subject of election integrity. We believe that this executive order is the farthest reaching executive action taken in the history of the Republic to secure our elections. Among numerous other aspects of this executive order, this is going to cut down on illegal immigrants on the voter rolls, ensure that the Department of Homeland Security and the data that they have available is being fully weaponized to ensure that illegal immigrants aren't voting. This will include a citizenship question on the federal voting form for the first time. This executive order instructs the EAC to cut federal funding to states that don't take reasonable steps to secure their election. This calls on the Department of Justice to vigorously prosecute election crimes, particularly in states that we don't believe are in compliance with federal law around election integrity. I could go on and on for a while, sir, but compliance with national election day rules, cracking down and investigating and prosecuting foreign interference in our elections, revoking President Biden's Executive Order 14019, which essentially weaponized government to corrupt and pollute our election process. There's a lot in here, but we believe that these are very important steps that we need to be taking as an administration at your direction to ensure that our elections are as secure as they possibly can be.
Okay, you all understand that? Yes. Mm-hmm. Election fraud, you've heard the term. We'll end it, hopefully. At least this will go a long way toward ending it. There are other steps that we will be taking in the coming weeks, and we think we'll be able to end up getting fair elections. Perhaps some people think I shouldn't be complaining because we won in a landslide, but we got to straighten out our election. This country is so sick because of the election, the fake elections and the bad elections, and we're going to straighten it out one way or the other. And it's an honor to sign this one.
Next, sir, we have a presidential memorandum for your attention. This memorandum requires the immediate declassification of all FBI files relating to the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. This was obviously one of the instances of the weaponization of law enforcement powers of prosecution against you and others. We believe that it's long past time for the American people to have a full and complete understanding of what exactly is in those files.
Which gives the media the right to go in and go and check it. You probably won't bother because you're not going to like what you see. But this was total weaponization. It's a disgrace. Should never happen in this country. But now you'll be able to see for yourselves, all declassified. Is that correct? Would you say? All declassified?
Yes, sir.
Everything?
The FBI file with there's a classified annex, but other than that, this will put everything in the public eye.
Is anybody going to look? What about you? You going to look? And frankly, the FBI should be ashamed of themselves, and so should the Department of Justice, and so should Biden. Okay?
Next, sir, we have an executive order for your attention. We've taken action against a number of law firms that have participated either in the weaponization of government, the weaponization of the legal system for political ends, or have otherwise engaged in illegal or inappropriate activities. The law firm of Jenner and Block is one of these law firms. This is a law firm that, as you know, employed Andrew Weissman after he came off of the Mueller investigation. It's a law firm that's engaged in invidious racially and sexually discriminatory practices. It's also a law firm that has participated in the weaponization of the legal system against American principles and values. And we believe that the measures in this executive order will help correct that.
And Andrew Weissman is the main culprit?
He's certainly...
With respect to this firm?
He is one of a number of reasons that we believe this executive order is warranted.
He's a bad guy. Okay.
Next, sir, we have an executive order for your attention relating actually to government payments. Historically, checks issued by the Treasury are, I believe, 14 times more likely to become the subject of fraud than electronic transfer payments. This is an executive order that's going to push the Treasury Department to modernize its payment system to ensure that where possible they're using electronic methods of payment as opposed to paper checks in order to reduce waste, fraud, and abuse in the government, which is obviously an endeavor that we've been pursuing in numerous aspects of government under your leadership.
It's basically modernization of equipment and methods, and it's something that really I think he's going to be a great Secretary of the Treasury wanted, Scott, and so we're doing this, and we have other modernization programs going on. We could let somebody else, whoever's next, whoever that may be, do it, but it's something that should have been done 25, 30 years ago. Okay.
Along similar lines, sir, this is an executive order. We're calling it Protecting America's Bank Account. The basic idea here is that instead of having lots of different departments and agencies and offices issuing payment, often without justification, often without any provided rationale, we're going to be centraling payment processes where possible in the Department of the Treasury and ensuring that measures are taken in Treasury against waste, fraud, and abuse to ensure that money that's leaving the public Treasury is as protected as it possibly can be.
All right, good. Many of these things should have taken place decades ago or longer.
Lastly, sir, we have an executive order for your attention on the very important subject of election integrity. We believe that this executive order is the farthest reaching executive action taken in the history of the Republic to secure our elections. Among numerous other aspects of this executive order, this is going to cut down on illegal immigrants on the voter rolls, ensure that the Department of Homeland Security and the data that they have available is being fully weaponized to ensure that illegal immigrants aren't voting. This will include a citizenship question on the federal voting form for the first time. This executive order instructs the EAC to cut federal funding to states that don't take reasonable steps to secure their election. This calls on the Department of Justice to vigorously prosecute election crimes, particularly in states that we don't believe are in compliance with federal law around election integrity. I could go on and on for a while, sir, but compliance with National Election Day rules, cracking down and investigating and prosecuting foreign interference in our elections, revoking President Biden's Executive Order 14019, which essentially weaponized government to corrupt and pollute our election process. There's a lot in here, but we believe that these are very important steps that we need to be taking as an administration at your direction to ensure that our elections are as secure as they possibly can be.
Okay, you all understand that? Yes. Election fraud, you've heard the term. We'll end it, hopefully. At least this will go a long way toward ending it. There are other steps that we will be taking in the coming weeks, and we think we'll be able to end up getting fair elections. Perhaps some people think I shouldn't be complaining because we won in a landslide, but we got to straighten out our election. This country is so sick because of the election, the fake elections and the bad elections, and we're going to straighten it out one way or the other. And it's an honor to sign this one. To sign all of them, but to sign this one is a great honor.
Did it change any of the practices that your national security officials used after a reporter was inadvertently added to a group chat about attacks on Yemen?
Well, I think it's a question I've been asked now, and I've given a few answers, and they've all been the same. We have an amazing group. Our national security now is stronger than it's ever been. We have had a very, very successful, numerous attacks on that area. These are people that shoot down ships, not only our ships, ships all over the world. They're shooting down right out of the water and damaging them badly, or they're going down. They're also shooting anything that happens to be flying in the area. We hit them very, very hard. There was no classified information, as I understand it. They used a app, if you want to call it an app, that a lot of people use, a lot of people in government use, a lot of people in the media use. And I think I'll ask Mike. Mike is here. Do you want to respond to that, please?
Yes, Mr. President. You asked about lessons. I think there's a lot of journalists in this city who have made big names for themselves, making up lies about this president, whether it's the Russia hoax or making up lies about Gold Star families. And this one in particular, I've never met, don't know, never communicated with.
Liar, liar, your pants on fire.
And we are looking into and reviewing how the heck he got into this room. But I'll tell you what, the world owes President Trump a favor. Under Biden, global shipping was shut down. Pinprick attacks, months between them, our destroyers being fired upon dozens of times. President Trump took decisive action with his national security team, took out the head missileer, knocked out missiles, knocked out headquarters, knocked out communication sites. And for once, as we hear, as you all hear from every one of our allies, thank God for American leadership again. Thank God for American strength. You're welcome. We had a national security team that was coordinating these efforts. As Director Radcliffe testified today, his first day on the job, he was introduced to this app on his government systems at the CIA and at the State Department and otherwise. So, look, this journalist, Mr. President, wants the world talking about more hoaxes and this kind of nonsense rather than the freedom that you're enabling. And a key part of our sovereignty is open sea lanes and knocking the crap out of terrorists, which is exactly what your team and Pete Hegseth, a good friend and fellow veteran, is leading the charge on.
Thank you very much. Ooh, that's a lot of good-looking people there. This is great. It's a great honor to be with you, and I want to thank everyone and welcome you to the most spectacular place, the White House. It's just an amazing place to live and to work in, and you know, I've seen a lot of good places, but believe me, there's nothing like this. It's just very special. It's great to have you here to celebrate Women's History Month. That's a big deal. And today we honor the legacy of incredible women like Betsy Ross, Harriet Tubman, Susan B. Anthony, Clara Barton, and Amelia Earhart, all legends. And their extraordinary courage and patriotism and devotion propelled our nation to glory and to greatness. They are great women, many great women. And thank you for the vote. You were very nice to me. The women we set every record. We loved it. We loved that vote. But we're delighted to be joined by some of the pioneering women who are making history in our own time. A woman that's just absolutely incredible. I can't tell you enough about her. She ran my campaign. We kept winning. And then we did well, where she won Florida by record numbers. And I said, you know, the second time I said, well, just keep running Florida. And the big one was stolen from us, you know. So I said, we better get her for number 3. And we won in records. We won every swing state. We won by millions of votes, the popular vote. We won everything. We won the districts, 2,750 to 507 or something like that. And we just won so big. And her name is Susie Wiles. And she, where are you, Susie? And she was just named by one of the very prominent media groups. I won't mention it because I cannot stand the people, but she was just named as, and it's true, the most powerful woman in the world. Susie, that is crazy, huh? That's a big, her father was a great, Pat Summerall, a great announcer, really great football player and announcer for the NFL for like 27 years. He really got the NFL. He did pretty well with the NFL. He got him off to a very good start, didn't he? But he was great. But she's got those same traits. So thank you very much, Susie. Great job. Also, we're going to go to somebody that's really the rage right now. She's the youngest ever White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. Caroline, look at you, huh? They said, sir, she's just too young. And I said, I don't know about that. She did awfully good because she did it during the campaign and she was awfully good. And she's been amazing. She just did another one just a little while ago. She looked at Susie and looked at me. I don't know. I think I'm ready, sir. How old are you? 27, right? 27. And I said, you're not too young. And she's knocking them dead. Everyone's talking about you. Thank you very much. Great job. And we have somebody else who's like a rocket ship, the counselor to the president. She served me well. I'm going to miss her, but we'll see a lot of her anyway. I hope it's on friendly basis because I've got to be very concerned because she's going to be the new U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey. Alina, where's Alina Habba? Alina Habba. Thanks, Alina. She's going to be great. I'll tell you, she's going to be great. She's a great lawyer and lives in New Jersey. And I said, that sounds like a good combination. Everybody wanted that job. They're all looking for the job. I said, wait a minute, doesn't Alina live in New Jersey? Yeah, I think Alina's going to get that job. So congratulations, Alina. It's fantastic.
Our DC Bureau Chief Ben Kennedy is live outside the White House with all the headlines coming out of Washington. Ben.
Today's Calvin, let's begin with tariffs. Trump said he's trying to even things out. It announced a 25% tariff on all cars not made here in the U.S.
We're going to charge countries for doing business in our country and taking our jobs, taking our wealth, taking a lot of things that they've been taking over the years. They've taken so much out of our country, friend and foe, and frankly, friend has been oftentimes much worse than foe. And this is very modest. And what we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff.
Johnny and Tracy, this executive order is expected to face legal challenges. It would affect voters and election officials. It also says if officials do not comply, federal funds could be withheld.
Do you think there's a reason why you should vote? Do you think that your vote counts?
Yes.
City Commissioners Chair Omar Sabir today at Dobbins Technical High School, making the case for young people to value voting as they become old enough to cast their own ballots. His pitch today coming the day after an executive order signed by President Trump that would affect requirements for voters registering and for election officials like Sabir.
What kind of impact do you think that executive order will have?
It would be major.
Sabir cited the order's requirement that people prove citizenship to register to vote, saying some voters might not have their birth certificate.
A lot of the advocates have said that that policy will restrict voting access to the electorate of America.
What do you do, though? I mean, because when you're registering people to vote, you do want to make sure that they're eligible. How do you make sure that someone is eligible to vote? You're not asking for those kinds of documents?
Well, sure they do. I mean, they have ID. I mean, they have to pass a Habba check inside of the system. So again, everyone has their ID to get verified. I mean, so they get verified through PennDOT, so there is a verification.
Sabir referring to an existing federal law and raising concerns about the order's requirement that publicly available voter registration lists be shared with federal agencies.
From what I understood, I mean, if you're talking about sharing information with Elon Musk, I mean, yes, it is a big concern to me.
And right off the top, another round of executive orders from President Donald Trump. He signed 3 orders yesterday. One of them is to end collective bargaining at agencies involved with national security. Another is meant to remove, quote, improper ideology from the Smithsonian Institution. The third is to make the District of Columbia safe and beautiful. And just moments ago, the president posted this on social media. He expanded on his order to make D.C. safe and beautiful, saying, I will work with the mayor on this, and if it does not happen, we'll have no choice but to do it myself. Trump also called on Congress to address funding to the nation's capital. So let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro to help us break all of this down. Happy Friday to you, Aaron. We've seen the president sign orders, but the impact can get lost in the shuffle. How can we expect to see these orders play out?
Hey, Muko, good to be with you. I will start with the executive order about the Smithsonian, where you saw President Trump essentially appoint Vice President Vance to lead a task force to review exhibits, programs that they believe are, quote, improper or have divisive ideology based on race. In a fact sheet provided by the White House, they specifically cite exhibits at the National Museum of African Americans as well as the National Museum of Women showing transgender women in their exhibits. That is something that the task force will look into, as well as look at prohibiting federal funding for exhibits that they disagree with. We know the Smithsonian's got about $1 billion of federal funding in the fiscal year of 2024. And that other big one, the one about Washington, D.C., also creates a task force to focus on ramping up law enforcement here when it comes to immigration enforcement, as well as a quick line in the fact sheet about expediting concealed carry licenses. There are strict gun rules and laws in Washington, D.C. This task force, which remains to be seen what exactly authority they have, since we don't know if there are any actual D.C. City Council members that will be on this task force, but Trump looking to exude more power over the nation's capital.
Just hours ago, President Trump called me to tell me he is, quote, pissed off with Russia's President Putin and threatened to impose secondary tariffs on Russia's oil. Quote, if Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault, which it might not be, but if I think it was Russia's fault, I am going to put secondary tariffs on all oil coming out of Russia. Mr. Trump said 25% tariffs on Russian oil could happen any moment and told me he plans to speak with President Putin this week. The president told me, quote, I was very angry, pissed off when Putin started getting into Zelensky's credibility and started talking about new leadership in Ukraine. On Iran, the president said he's also considering secondary tariffs if Iran doesn't agree to a nuclear deal. Quote, if they don't make a deal, there will be bombing, and it will be bombing the likes of which they have never seen before.
President Trump says he's serious about a third presidential term.
That's right. This as his 25% tariff on imported cars begins this week. Robert Moses is live in Woodside, Queens. Robert, what are you doing out in Woodside, Queens with this story?
Well, Dan and Tashani, the reason why we're here is because these auto tariffs are a big deal in these parts where car dealerships dot the landscape. Let's face it, there's practically one on every block. Over the weekend, the president reiterated that his upcoming auto tariffs will be permanent. And as for a third term, he mused that potentially his vice president, J.D. Vance, could run, then win, then resign, and then pass the baton right back to him.
I'm not looking at that, but I'll tell you, I have had more people ask me to have a third term.
Aboard Air Force One late yesterday, President Donald Trump did not rule out running for a third term, even though the Constitution forbids a person from being elected president more than twice. Reporters questioned him after he told NBC's Kristen Welker by phone that he's, quote, not joking about a third term.
I have had more people say, please run again. So many people are saying, you've got to run again. So, Alina, I want to congratulate you now. I will ask Pam, our Attorney General, to come up and do the honors of swearing in. And this is a great day for law enforcement in our country. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear.
I, Alina Habba, do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
that I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully.
And that I will well and faithfully.
Discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
Discharge the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, U.S. Attorney Habba.
Thank you so much, President Trump. Thank you, Pam Bondi. Thank you, more importantly, to every person in this room. There are so many people that I won't even try to start naming them. That I would not be standing here today if it was not for the man to my right. If, as a person who's a first-generation American with parents that came in legally, I would like to say that I do not ever, ever take for granted that every dream that I ever could have imagined I have surpassed because of this administration, because of President Trump. 4 years ago, he entrusted faith in me as his personal attorney, and I have been on the journey of a lifetime every single day for that. But I have also been with him through some very dark days when I lost faith in our justice system, when I saw things that I never, ever thought I would ever see. And from being outside the courtroom steps, defending him and defending our great nation, I saw the most resilience I've ever seen in my life. This man kept fighting for America, and I'm just so honored that now I get to fight for the state of New Jersey. I will do a good job, sir. I will clean it up, and we're going to make New Jersey great again. Thank you so much. Thank you.
President Trump also announcing yesterday that they're pulling the nomination for UN ambassador. What can you tell us behind the sudden change there?
Well, Craig, the White House says it's all about the margins in Congress. In the House, the GOP advantage is just a handful of seats. And once Stefanik was confirmed, Republicans would be short an otherwise reliable vote on the Trump agenda for a big chunk of the rest of the year until her seat could be filled by a special election. Keeping Stefanik in the House adds a little bit of a cushion, but I can't stress enough how unusual it is for a nominee who's already had a confirmation hearing and who would have easily gotten bipartisan support to be confirmed to be suddenly yanked from consideration like this. So there may very well be more to this story.
Today, yet more examples that the Social Security Administration is in turmoil because of the cuts that Elon Musk and D.O.G.E are making. The Washington Post reports the Social Security Administration website crashed 4 times in 10 days this month, blocking millions of retirees and disabled Americans from logging into their online accounts because the servers were overloaded. That comes as 2 sources tell Axios the administration is rushing to cut phone services at the White House's request. Which brings us to Frank Bisignano, facing questions from lawmakers today in his bid to become Social Security's permanent administrator. It's had 4 administrators in the past 5 months to serve 73 million retired workers. But his approach appears to contradict what's been happening.
When you have a system that is not working now, do you think it's a great idea to lay off half of the employees?
I don't know do I think it's a great idea to lay off half of the employees when a system doesn't work? I think the answer is probably no.
Have you been consulted by the acting commissioner about D.O.G.E.'s work at the Social Security Administration?
I have not had a conversation about anything with this Social Security commissioner who's acting right now.
Joining us now, NBC's Julie Sirkin, reporting from Capitol Hill. Mark McKinnon is former advisor to George W. Bush and John McCain and creator of The Circus. So, Julie, what did we learn about the future of Social Security from today's confirmation hearing?
Well, Chris, Frank Bisignano, who is the CEO of Pfizer, of a financial technology company that he actually brought into good financial standing. They more than doubled their stock prices during his time as the leader of that company. So you can see what kind of approach he's taken to things. That does concern some Democrats, though, who spent the majority of their questions asking and prodding him specifically on whether he would curtail Elon Musk and D.O.G.E.'s efforts, especially when it comes to accessing Americans' personally identifiable information. He was asked about this point blank. Take a listen to this exchange, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Will you lock D.O.G.E. out of Social Security databases?
I'm going to do whatever is required to protect the information that is private information. So I don't know what lock Doge out means.
Are you willing to commit right now that you will put enough people back to work so they can do the job of delivering the benefits that Americans earned?
I will commit,
yes or no?
I will commit to have the right staffing to get the job done.
To get the job done, meaning delivering the benefits people are entitled to?
Yes.
Now, Bisignano vowed that there will be no impact to seniors, millions of whom are relying and receive these benefits. He did, of course, say that he will be looking to streamline and modernize the agency. That agency will be insolvent in the matter of this decade, Chris, if Congress or the government doesn't do something to save it. However, it's extremely unpopular. It's known as the third rail of politics for a reason to touch this agency. Bisignano saying he could even use AI to root out what he called waste, fraud, and abuse. That is, of course, a similar line that we've been hearing from Elon Musk's own efforts over at DOGE. So Bisignano there testifying before the committee that oversees the Social Security Administration.
The Trump administration takes action to stop the exploitation of housing programs for illegal migrants. The Department of Housing and Urban Development teaming up with the Homeland Security, signing the American Housing Programs for American Citizens Memorandum of Understanding yesterday. This MOU, a critical agreement designed to end the misuse of taxpayer money by preventing illegal migrants from accessing federal housing programs. Joining me now is the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner. Secretary, great to have you this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, good morning, Maria. Thank you so much for having me.
First, take us back. How significant was the situation in terms of federal housing meant for American citizens being used by illegal aliens and illegal migrants in the last 4 years?
Well, it's very significant. You know, the Biden administration was completely irresponsible, and the border security and immigration policies were very harmful to our country, so much that they prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. And so, as you alluded to before, Secretary Noem and I, we put an end to that yesterday with our partnership and MOU to make sure that the American citizens, American people, are not only prioritized, but they are the only priority when it comes to HUD-funded public housing instead of illegal aliens. I mean, right now, Maria, we serve 1 out of 4 Americans in need of public housing. Well, that's going to change. We should be serving 4 out of 4, every American that needs public housing to this point. And so this MOU will allow us to do that and ensure that the American people are taken care of.
Well, I mean, Secretary, this is just unbelievable. I mean, here we are talking for so many years about this inability of young people to get a house and this fact that we've got homeless people on the streets and we've got veterans that need housing. And all of a sudden, we recognize that we have the availability. It's not some massive shortage. It's just that the housing that's on the books are being used for illegals.
That's right. I mean, it's supply and demand. You know, we have the precious, hardworking taxpayers of America are our priority. And as you alluded to, young people are saying, well, how am I going to get a house? And so right now, you look at the deportations and the job that the president and Secretary Noem are doing of closing the border, securing the border. But those that are here have to understand that you will not be allowed to use taxpayer money to live in public housing. And so not only is the supply going to go up, but the demand is going to go down, because we are ensuring that any public housing will be used for American citizens. Right now, Maria, 9 million people lived in public or subsidized housing. And this MOU will help us to ensure that the data will tell us who's in these houses. The ones that are illegal will know that they're illegal. And so that our American people will have places to live like they deserve.
Thanks for having us and doing this. I know there's a lot of interest in this. You know, first, let me start with you, Elon. What are the budgetary savings goals, and how much do you think you've achieved so far?
Our goal is to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion. From a nominal deficit of $2 trillion to try to cut the deficit in half to $1 trillion, or looked at it in total federal spending to drop the federal spending from $7 trillion to $6 trillion. We want to reduce the spending by eliminating waste and fraud, reduce the spending by 15%. Which seems really quite achievable. The government is not efficient, and there's a lot of waste and fraud. So we feel confident that a 15% reduction can be done without affecting any of the critical government services.
I'm going to talk to all the guys.
If not making it better.
I'm going to talk to all the guys here about the specifics, but for you, what's the most astonishing thing you've found out in this process?
The sheer amount of waste and fraud in the government. It is astonishing. It's mind-blowing. We routinely encounter wastes of $1 billion or more, casually. For example, like the simple survey that was literally a 10-question survey that you could do with SurveyMonkey, cost you about $10,000, the government was being charged almost $1 billion for that.
For just the survey?
$1 billion for a simple online survey, do you like the national park? And then there appeared to be no feedback loop for what would be done with that survey. So the survey would just go into nothing. It was like insane. You
technically are a special government employee, and you're supposed to be 130 days. Are you going to continue past that, or do you think that's what you're going to do? Or?
Well, I think we will have accomplished most of the work required to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion within that time frame.
So in that time frame, 130 days. And the process is a report at some point, at 100 days? Or?
Not really a report. We are cutting the waste and fraud in real time. So every day that passes, our goal is to reduce the waste and fraud by $4 billion a day, every day, 7 days a week. And so far, we are succeeding.
And I'm going to talk to the specifics, but there obviously are DOGE critics who are reading all kinds of stuff. Obviously, lawmakers on the other side of the aisle are attacking you, and they characterize the approach as this: fire, ready, and then aim. And how do you approach that? How do you respond to that?
Well, I do agree that we actually want to be careful in the cuts. So we want to measure twice, if not thrice, and cut once. Actually, that is our approach. They may characterize it as shooting from the hip, but it is anything but that. Which is not to say that we don't make mistakes. If we were to approach this with the standard of making no mistakes at all, that would be like saying someone in baseball's got to bat 1,000. That's impossible. So when we do make mistakes, we correct them quickly, and we move on.
The process still involves Congress, right? At some level?
We try to keep Congress as informed as possible, but the law does say that money needs to be spent correctly. It should not be spent fraudulently or wastefully. It's not contrary to Congress to avoid waste and fraud. It is consistent with the law and consistent with Congress. And we've seen actually great support, at least from the Republican side of the House, and occasionally some Democrats too. It's nice to see people cross the aisle once in a while. But usually when they attack DOGE, they never attack any of the specifics. So they'll say what we're doing is somehow unconstitutional or illegal or whatever. We're like, well, which line of the cost savings do you disagree with? And they can't point to any. And we list them all on DOGE.gov and the DOGE handle on X. And you'll see just outrageous things, one outrageous thing after another.
Co-founder of Airbnb, and you wanted to help out.
They told me something about a mine that was dealt with retirement, and they said they needed somebody to help out to fix retirement in the government. I love the challenge, so I jumped on board, and it turns out there is actually a mine in Pennsylvania that houses every paper document for the retirement process in the government. Now picture this. This giant cave has 22,000 filing cabinets, stacked 10 high to house 400 million pieces of paper. It's a process that started in the 1950s and largely hasn't changed in the last 70 years. And so as we dug into it, we found retirement cases that had so much paper, they had to fit it on a shipping pallet. So the process takes many months, and we're going to make it just many days.
Will it be digitized, or how?
Absolutely. So this will be an online digital process that will take just a few days at most. And I really think, it's an injustice to civil servants who are subjected to these processes that are older than the age of half the people watching your show tonight. So we really believe that the government can have an Apple Store-like experience, beautifully designed, great user experience, modern systems.
Because right now, it's by hand.
Yes, the retirement process is all by paper, literally with people carrying paper in manila envelopes into this gigantic mine.
So they can't retire more than a certain number every month?
Yes.
About 8,000 a month.
That's how we. The reason we discovered it was we were saying like, well, let's encourage voluntary retirement. They said, well, the most they could do is $8,000 a month, and even under normal circumstances, it can take 6 to 9 months just to have your retirement paperwork processed, and they often get the calculations wrong. So we're like, well, why would it take so long to retire? And they're like, well, because of the mine. And we're like, what do you mean a mine? What's a mine got to do with retiring? And that's where we discovered that all the retirement stuff is still done by paper in a process that looks identical to what occurred in the 1950s. Like if you took a snapshot of the mine when it first started in the 50s to today, it looks the same.
It's amazing. So how long do you think it'll take to turn over?
We're working as fast as we can. Probably next couple of months we'll have this overhauled. And, I really think, again, like, why are we subjecting our federal workers to processes that they actually have to go through a training just to retire from the government? There's a whole training program that people have to go through in order to retire. I think we can do better for them.
Our goal is to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion. So from a nominal deficit of $2 trillion to try to cut the deficit in half to $1 trillion, or looked at it in total federal spending to drop the federal spending from $7 trillion to $6 trillion. Well, this is a revolution, and I think it might be the biggest revolution in government since the original revolution. But at the end of the day, America is going to be in much better shape.
Elon Musk speaking with Brett Baer on Fox Thursday night about DOGE and what he calls a government resolution to cut spending. But that revolution will soon continue without the billionaire. Musk also saying that his time at the head of Trump's cost-cutting agency will be coming to a close at the end of May. That's due to the 130-day limit on his official role as a special government employee. Joining us now with more details is the Hill's White House reporter, Brett Samuels. Brett, thanks for joining us. Musk has been the target of much criticism from both Congress and the public for these cuts. Now he says he'll step down. Do you think this is final, or do you expect Trump to make a move to try to keep him around?
Yeah, I think this will not be the last that we see of Elon Musk, Judy. When his special government employee status expires at the end of May, he may not be brought back in some official government capacity, but certainly I think we can continue to expect to see Elon Musk in Trump's orbit, advising Trump, and being a presence, in Trump world and in Republican politics.
So your prediction is that he's going to stay involved in some way in the political sphere?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure that he'll, be given some official title or become a full-time government employee, but certainly I would expect him to remain active. Certainly he's very close with President Trump and his allies now. So certainly, I don't think Elon Musk will disappear from the Washington scene once those 130 days are up.
Attorney General Pam Bondi announced that the Department of Justice will prosecute the fraud uncovered by Elon Musk's DOGE. Watch this.
We are hearing a lot about fraud, waste, and abuse. A lot of waste and abuse, but there is a tremendous amount of fraud. And Elon, thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your team. You have uncovered so much fraud in our government, and we will prosecute you. We have an internal task force now working with every agency sitting here at this table. And if you've committed fraud, we're coming after you.
Congressman, how do you prosecute government fraud?
Well, first of all, let me speak on behalf of American taxpayers across the nation when they see that clip of Attorney General Bondi saying we're going to prosecute fraudsters. The word is finally. Finally, accountability is coming to Washington, D.C. We've never seen it before. We've never seen accountability. So I was on the Small Business Administration. We watched millions of dollars walk out the door in fraud on purpose during COVID. And so finally, we're going to get some accountability. So the American taxpayer is dancing in the street and is saying, go get them, Pam Bondi. Let's go get them.
But quickly, can we get the money back? Can we get the money back?
Yeah, Roger Williams is the chair of the Small Business Administration. We fought the Biden Small Business Administrator, who at one time was going to say, let's just forgive all of these fraudsters. Let's not go after them. And we said, heck no. The worst thing we could do is just sell this debt to debt collectors, but we're coming after them. And I think we have the technology. DOGE has proven it. We have the technology. We have the receipts of they've taken this money. So all we need is a little task force to go after these fraudsters. They've never had to worry about it. They never thought anybody was coming, but they didn't anticipate Pam Bondi coming to get them.
Major news coming out of a major city after promising to bring safety back to Boston. Border czar Tom Homan is already seeing results. Homan announcing that 370 illegal immigrants were recently arrested, with a majority of them being, quote, significant criminals with charges including murder, drug trafficking, and child sex crimes. Homan writing in a lengthy X post, I made a promise at CPAC that I was going to Boston after reading about numerous illegal alien child rapists walking the streets of Boston and Massachusetts. ICE had to find and arrest these illegal alien rapists because Massachusetts and Boston are sanctuaries that refuse to cooperate with ICE. They would rather release these animals back into their community rather than honor ICE detainers or notify ICE when they are scheduled to be released. Mayor Wu later testified that I was lying. Thomas Hodgson is the former sheriff of Bristol County, Massachusetts, and he joins me now. Sheriff, good morning to you. What is it like being a sheriff, a former sheriff, in a state that allows this to happen?
Well, good morning, Carly. Thank you for having me. It makes it more difficult, obviously. In my case, I'm a Republican who served 25 and a half years, and I had an immigration detention facility for that entire 25 was housing for them for an entire 25 and a half years. I built a facility and had one of the largest in the country with regards to holding detainees at about an average of 225 a day. But that didn't mean that I wasn't going to be getting a lot of flack, which I did, from the dominant Democrat legislature, the current governor, and the former governor as well, Deval Patrick, trying to undermine my abilities to keep my community safe and uphold my oath. It's particularly difficult for any sheriff in Massachusetts that wants to do that, although I'll give credit to the Plymouth County sheriff, who is now housing detainees there and doing a good job with it. He's full speed ahead.
Yeah, well, so some people are trying to find workarounds to this, but to your point, just take a look at the people that the state of Massachusetts, the city of Boston, have allowed back onto the streets. A Guatemalan charged with 3 counts of aggravated child rape, released on $7,500 bail. Another Guatemalan charged with aggravated child rape of a victim aged 9 or younger, released on $7,500 bail. A Honduran charged with assault to rape, masked armed robbery, released on his own recognizance, 0 bail, and the list goes on and on. You know, Sheriff, I'm sure that even these criminals are thinking, wow, I'm getting off easy. I'm lucky here. Is there something that we're missing here as to why this is happening? What is your reaction to that list that I just read?
Well, that's exactly what Tom Homan's been talking about, and that's what all of us in law enforcement have understood. But not these politicians like Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, who frankly is more interested in her personal benefits than she is in her public service. Look, she was elected like the rest of us and took an oath to uphold the rule of law. And what they're doing is she's creating this cover for criminals to come here, illegal aliens to come here and know that they're going to have a less likely chance of being identified. And it isn't just about Boston's crime. What about all the neighboring communities? They're going to lay low in Boston because they're going to get the cover they need, but then they go to these neighboring communities and commit more crimes.
Yeah, that's a great point. It just doesn't stay in the city. It also spills out to other areas as well. So if you remember a couple weeks ago, Mayor Michelle Wu, she was up on Capitol Hill testifying about sanctuary cities. She was asked a very pointed question about illegal immigrant rapists and whether or not her city allows them back out onto the streets, and she denied it. Listen.
When an illegal alien rapes a woman, do you believe you're on the right side of history? Mayor Wu, yes or no?
No, rape is obviously
Then
horrible.
why are you letting rapists back out onto the streets of Boston?
That is not true. That is not what's happening in Boston.
And yesterday, Governor Maura Healey put out a statement saying Massachusetts is not a sanctuary state. So how do you respond to that?
Look, Governor Healey has been a long-standing advocate going back to the days of her being attorney general. She filed more lawsuits against Donald Trump than any other attorney general in the country. She was on the other side of the Mexican border, when she was Attorney General, saying that the United States was wrong for not allowing illegals to come into our country without going through the proper process. And this is a governor who has been a pro-woke, left-wing supporter of illegal immigrants. And you know what? The people of Massachusetts are getting fed up with it. And they're tired of her looking beyond their public safety, the safety of their communities, and saying, my political agenda is more important than you, the people that I swore I would protect. And that's the problem we have in Massachusetts.
Off the top here at 5 o'clock, we have just learned that a Tufts University graduate student was taken into ICE custody because investigators allege she was engaged in activities in support of Hamas.
Now, they did not give any specifics about what the student is accused of doing. WBZ's Beth Germano is live in Somerville, where a rally will soon be underway with people who are, Beth, supporting that student.
Well, the arrest has certainly sent shockwaves through the Tufts University campus. And as students and friends prepare to gather in support of Rumeysa Ozturk, the Department of Homeland Security has now confirmed she's been sent to an ICE detention center in Louisiana, which flies in the face of a federal judge who ruled she should not leave Massachusetts without prior notification. And based on interviews with neighbors, it appears federal agents were watching and waiting. The screams of a frightened Tufts University graduate student as a half-dozen ICE agents intercept her on a Somerville sidewalk and cuff her late Tuesday afternoon.
Where the police?
Her attorney says Rumeysa Ozturk, a PhD student, is a Turkish national here on an international student visa. She was walking up the sidewalk near her home, about to get dinner with friends to break her Ramadan fast, when the masked agents took her into custody and put her in an unmarked vehicle. Neighbors claim they've been watching the area.
We had noticed a person sitting in a Ford Explorer, black Ford Explorer, just on the corner of our street for a full day with the engine on and taking notes, so we were a little bit surprised to see that.
That's one of the cars, and that's the other car that's kind of involved here.
It was Mike Mathis's security camera that caught the arrest, saying one of the vans had been on the street yesterday since the early morning.
Can I see some faces here? How do I know this is the police?
I live in Somerville. You know, we're supposed to be a sanctuary city. We're supposed to be a place of safety. She's a student here on a visa.
It's unclear why Ozturk was targeted. She had allegedly voiced support for the pro-Palestinian movement at Tufts, but was not known as a prominent leader. Her attorney said in a statement, "We are unaware of her whereabouts and have not been able to contact her. No charges have been filed against Rumeysa to date that we are aware of." Ozturk's neighbor says her friends were frantically looking for her.
We saw the neighbors coming in yesterday, and they're banging on the door, and they're asking if we had seen anything or heard anything.
The arrest is now having a chilling impact on this campus and beyond.
I feel for all the international students that have to be scared right now and carry documentation with them while they're on their own campus.
Well, WPTV News has uncovered documents showing a man was charged with smuggling about 10 people into the country near Boynton Beach. Now, Ethan Stein found the federal court filing. He's in studio to explain how much migrants are paying to try and get into the country. Ethan?
Todd, with various boats capsized on our beaches, we're continuing to dig for information on migrants taken into custody. These documents help us understand the financial costs and benefits in illegal immigration. Federal prosecutors say a man admitted to being paid $8,000 to bring people into the country illegally from the Bahamas. Records show he faces 8 counts of bringing aliens into the U.S. for private financial gain. Prosecutors also say migrants told officials they paid in the range of $4,000 to $11,000 to enter the country. 2 migrants on the boat, according to documents, were deported 5 months ago. The so-called border recidivism rates have grown in the past decade. The most recent data in 2021 we obtained from Customs and Border Patrol found 27% of individuals were apprehended more than one time within the same fiscal year. Prosecutors say this happened about 3 miles off Boynton Beach, and the boat sank after the operator was taken into custody. 9 people in total were on the boat.
Could teenagers soon replace deported migrants in our workforce? A Senate bill that narrowly advanced in the legislature aims to ease child labor laws, allowing minors to work more hours. The governor thinks it could fill positions left vacant by having fewer undocumented immigrants.
CBS News Miami's Chelsea Jones is in the Redland with how a local teen is hoping this helps his quest of finding employment.
I talked to a 17-year-old who is working with his dad over spring break to make a little extra cash. He says he's been looking for work unsuccessfully for 2 years, and a law like this could have helped him. Alex Jesse is no stranger to labor. He's been on track loaders like this since he was 7 years old. Instead of spring break fun, he's working to restore the Pine Rocklands, working for his dad's company because finding work hasn't been easy.
I've applied to Publix, Walmart, and different places, food franchises.
And all of them tell you you're too young?
Yeah.
Tuesday, the state legislature advanced the bill that would allow 16 and 17-year-olds to work more than 8 hours a day on school nights and 30 hours a week without mandated breaks. It would also allow 14 and 15-year-olds that have graduated from high school, are homeschooled, or attend virtual schools to work.
What's wrong with expecting our young people to be working part-time now? I mean, that's how it used to be when I was growing up.
The idea is that with this bill, low-wage or undesirable jobs once filled with migrants now get filled with younger workers, a solution Governor Ron DeSantis supports.
I don't think the at night late working and going to school doesn't sound to me to be something conducive for a young person.
McNagey is the owner of Mixed Greens.
We farm about 100 acres of tree farming.
He employs younger workers but says they need balance.
I'm all for after-school agricultural work, but if I had my way, I'd make sure they stay in school too.
Jesse says if a law like Senate Bill 918 existed 2 years ago, it could have helped him prepare for his future as a welder.
I would have been able to be employed, make money, so I'm able to afford a car. Have the things that I'd like. I either want to go out to the oil rigs and weld underwater or do the pipelines.
Critics of this bill believe that this will lead to sleep deprivation of children, academic decline, even added pressure for those working to help their families. This bill will now head before 2 separate committees before going before the full Senate for a vote. In the Redland, I'm Chelsea Jones, CBS News, Miami.
Now, the Trump administration is pushing ahead with its pledge to implement the largest deportation plan, as he describes it, in the United States' history. On Saturday, the University of Minnesota said that one of its international students was detained by immigration authorities, though the student's identity and the reason for their detention remains unclear. For more on this, I'm joined by our international affairs editor, Ketevan Gorgestani. Ketevan, so this is just the latest case of an international student being detained in the U.S., again, legal residents of the United States. Can you tell us more about the Trump administration's targeting of this new category specifically?
Look, the first known and most high-profile case is, of course, the one of Mahmoud Halil, who's a Columbia University student. He's a Palestinian, a green card holder, so a permanent legal resident of the United States, married to an American. He has been detained and is facing now deportation for his leading role in pro-Palestinian protests on Columbia's campus. Then you have Rumeysa Öztürk. The images that we're seeing right now are of her arrest. She was arrested by half a dozen plainclothes and masked immigration agents who simply took her on the street, detained her. It's for her writing or co-authoring an editorial in her university, Tufts University's school paper, which was criticizing the school's response to some of these pro-Palestinian protests on that campus. Several other people, either students or academics, have been either detained and or deported. As I said, students, professors, both student visa holders as well as green card holders. And the Trump administration's argument is that somehow these people pose a threat to the United States because of their pro-Palestinian stance, because they associate that with being pro-Hamas, which is, according to the United States, a terrorist organization. These are just the most public cases, but the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, just recently said that the U.S. had revoked more than 300 visas. They didn't specify how many of these were student visas, but he said student and visitor visas had been revoked and that they were going to continue revoking those visas. He said, quote, "We're looking every day way for these lunatics that are tearing things up. And now you have U.S. immigration officials trying to push for an expansion on social media surveillance, not just for people who are applying right now to enter the United States, but also for those who are already legally in the U.S., who have already been vetted. That means people who have, for example, a green card, asylum seekers, and even those who are legally in the U.S. and currently applying for U.S. citizenship.
So, Ketevan, how are authorities then justifying their actions?
Well, in the case of the detention and deportation or attempted deportation of the students and professors, the U.S. authorities are using a rarely used provision of a law that dates back to the Cold War. It's the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. That provision gives the Secretary of State broad authority to expel foreigners that are deemed to pose, quote, potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences to the country. And in that case, it gives the Secretary of State really broad authority because they only need a reasonable grounds to expel those foreigners, and they cannot be forced to justify their decision in front of a court. The Trump administration is in parallel, also using a very, very old law to deport Venezuelan migrants. That's the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 that we've talked about many times. In that case, they're using it to say that those Venezuelan migrants belong to a Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, that the U.S. now considers a terrorist organization. Why am I talking about these two laws? What do they have in common? Where the idea is to get around traditional immigration law that gives the opportunity to expel people if they are deemed to be a threat, if they are associated with terrorist groups. But in these two laws, the idea is that you get around the due process that is given not only to U.S. citizens, but also to a foreign citizen. So they're really taking away the opportunity for those migrants or those visa holders to prove their case, to say, no, I'm not a member of a terrorist organization, and yes, I can challenge this in court.
Let's talk some earnings here. GameStop results just hitting the wire, but I should mention first, and it's probably why the stock is up, the company is announcing an update to its investment policy to add Bitcoin as a Treasury reserve asset. This was broadly speculated upon. We have seen the stock pop as of late in expectation of this. There's no other details in the statement, by the way. It just says, update to its investment policy to add Bitcoin as a Treasury reserve asset. There are no details on how it's going to add it. There's no details on how they're going to raise funds to do that, although who knows, maybe they'll follow on the heels of strategy and issue shares in order to do that. And by the way, all of this coming as the company's numbers missed estimates. Sales in the fourth quarter down 28% to $1.28 billion. That is a worse result than had been estimated.
Yeah, the stock, I'm just looking at the chart. I mean, heading into this print, it was down around 20% year to date, but if you pull it back, I mean, it was up around 70% over the past 12 months. Now we're tacking on almost 8% here in the after hours. Not a ton of coverage on the street, frankly, at this point, Drew, on this one. In fact, I see 0 buys. I got 1 hold and 1 sell. And we know who that 1 sell is.
Yeah, it's our friend Michael Pachter. We spoke to him just yesterday about GameStop in anticipation of the results, and this is what he told us.
They're not going to make an operating profit in the year they're about to report. They're not going to make one this year or next year or ever. So if their operations continue to lose money, it's hard to value them at several $1 billion, and the market's just got this one wrong.
And indeed, you know, the company coming out and saying it did make a net income for its fiscal year 2024 here, but we'll continue to dig into these numbers. But you know, he's not alone, as you say, in not being enthusiastic about the stock, which is effectively a meme stock. We'll see what happens with this Bitcoin ad.
I think Michael, he just doesn't he's bearish, doesn't see a rebound in the core business, skeptical about the getting into trading cards and crypto, but got stock up 6.5% right here.
There's one real estate analyst who says the housing market looks a lot like it did in 2008. Ouch, at least for home builders, that is. He posted a picture from a building site in Florida with over 20 completed houses for sale. They were advertising 0% down mortgages. They're trying to move the inventory. Not having much luck. Mansion Global host Katrina Campion's with me here in New York right now. Is the housing market about to crash?
No. The market conditions now are very different than we had in 2008. First of all, Americans have a large amount of equity in their homes, right? And despite economic fluctuations, home values have remained strong. We also have seen a lack of inventory in the market. Now, I know it's very difficult to make a blanket statement for the entire U.S., but for the most part, we haven't had enough inventory. Now, in February, we saw an increase of 30% inventory in the market compared to last year. And there's markets like Florida or Texas that obviously have more inventory than others. But I think another good sign is that first-time home buyers have come into the market, and the share of first-time home buyers is actually rising, reaching 31%, which proves that the American dream is still alive, which I love to hear.
If the market doesn't crash, but could you see some decline in home prices?
Well, I think we're going to see a decline in the amount of growth that you see across the entire nation. But I think the word crash is not going to happen.
Yeah,
I understand that it's a headline, but I don't see this. No, I think especially with the spring market here, I think we have a fresh new outlook, and with this administration, things are going to get better.
7.38 million vehicles were imported and sold in the United States last year. Now, I want you to imagine that if you had that same demand, you're going to put a 25% tariff on 7.38 million vehicles. Clearly, that is not going to happen. What's going to happen once these tariffs go into effect is the automakers will respond in a couple of ways. One, they're going to slow down production in foreign plants for vehicles that are imported here to the United States. They're going to also probably have to raise prices and cut incentives. That'll probably happen fairly quickly. And the final decision they'll have to make is how much capacity do they have to bring production back into the United States? The president says, well, there's some places that only have 60% capacity. It's not as simple as just flipping a switch. There's tooling. There's also making sure that the plant and the supply chain can adjust and bring production from a particular plant overseas back here. But there's no doubt this is going to be a huge hit for the auto industry. One executive in the industry texted me earlier and he said, this is going to drive the auto industry, not the overall economy, strictly the auto industry, into a recession.
President Trump's SEC nominee Paul Atkins is testifying before the Senate Banking Committee today. In his opening statement, Atkins noted that since 2017, he's led industry efforts to develop best practices for digital assets and has seen how ambiguous and non-existent regulations for crypto create uncertainty in the market and inhibit innovation. He also said it would be his top priority to provide a regulatory foundation for digital assets, and that he will work with commissioners and Congress to make that happen. Fortune reports that Atkins owns up to $6 million in crypto-related assets, and that up until February, he owned between $250,000 to $500,000 of call options in the BlackRock-backed tokenization firm Securitize. He also reportedly held the same amount in equity in crypto custodian Anchorage Digital, along with a stake in Off the Chain Capital, a fund that invests in digital assets and blockchain projects, worth between $1 and $5 million. In his ethics disclosure, Atkins said he resigned from his position with Securitize in February and would divest his stock options in the company shortly after his potential confirmation. He also said he resigned from his position with the Digital Chamber, a blockchain advocacy group, as well as the Chamber's Token Alliance. We reached out to Potomac Global Partners, the financial services consultancy firm where Atkins currently serves as chief executive, for comment, but did not hear back right away. Next, the House version of stablecoin legislation was released publicly yesterday. The Stablecoin Transparency and Accountability for a Better Ledger Economy, or the STABLE Act, was introduced by Republican Representative French Hill. chair of the House Financial Services Committee, and Brian Steele, who heads the Crypto and AI Subcommittee. The bill aims to establish a better framework for the issuance and operation of dollar-denominated payment stablecoins in the U.S. In a statement, Steele said the Stable Act will help the U.S. secure the future of financial payments and continued dominance of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. He noted that the bill is the result of extensive collaboration with committee members, stakeholders, and the administration over the past few weeks. The initial draft of the bill was introduced in February, and this updated version from the House comes after the Senate Banking Committee advanced its own version of stablecoin legislation called the Genius Act earlier this month. In a video address at the Digital Asset Summit in New York City last week, President Trump reiterated support for stablecoin legislation to pass through Congress, saying it will help expand the dollar's dominance. Also yesterday, House Majority Whip Tom Emmer reintroduced his Securities Clarity Act, which aims to provide clear guidelines for digital assets.
I want to get your take on the tariff policy because in the PCE data, we saw perhaps some evidence that it's already impacting consumer spending. You had durable goods spending rising 1.4%, car spending up. Meantime, you had people spending less on things like food services, for example. Perhaps an indication that people are already recalibrating their personal budgets in anticipation of those tariffs. At what point does the nature and the headlines surrounding these tariffs become sort of unrecoverable when it comes to the consumer sentiment impact?
Comfortable is a word I think that's, I'm not really, particularly concerned with. I do think the consumer remains fairly resilient. I do think that there is, I would agree with you that there are clear indications that people are nervous. If someone is employed by the federal government, for instance, they've had this kind of on again, off again, am I employed, am I not employed thing going on, which is, respectably very concerning. That's going to restrict spending. People who are adjacent to the government, same kind of thing. But I do think in the next few months, we're going to realize that the DOGE actually doesn't cut jobs itself, and that the job cuts are going to be fairly limited. And, in terms of consumer sentiment, rising prices are a potential concern, but if prices don't rise quite that much, then I think we'll see the strength of household balance sheets will weigh out over the, concern and sentiment. And people, especially the top end of the income distribution that's been driving growth this whole time, will continue to drive overall growth. I'm certainly sympathetic to the bottom half of the income distribution. It is a very challenging environment to be in. But, if they pull back a little bit, it frankly, just based on the math, doesn't drag down growth into recession territory.
Mississippi taking matters into its own hands to put more money in the pockets of residents. The governor signing an historic bill this week to abolish the state's income tax, becoming the 10th state in the nation to eliminate income tax. Joining me now in a Fox Business exclusive is the governor of Mississippi, Tate Reeves. Governor, great to have you this weekend. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Maria. It's great to see you, and it's a great day to be an American, and it's a great day to be a Mississippian.
Well, this bill has been in the works for 15 years. Tell us what it will mean for the Mississippi economy.
Well, this is, Maria, this is our one big, beautiful bill in Mississippi. We've been working to cut taxes and moving towards eliminating the income tax, and I was finally able to sign a bill into law this week that over time gets us to accomplish exactly that goal. In Mississippi, we believe government ought to take less so that our people get to keep more of their money.
And when you look at other states that have no income tax, you've seen a huge surge of individuals moving from high tax states to low tax states or no income tax states. Is that what you're expecting?
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you see not only economic growth in those states with no income tax, you also see population growth in those states. And we think we have a beautiful state in Mississippi. We've got a beautiful coastline on the Gulf of America. And I will just tell you that we have seen significant economic growth over the last 5 years. We've seen over $30 billion in new capital investment flowing to our state. And we think by eliminating our income tax, we're going to see not only more income and capital flow into our state. We think we're going to see more people flow into our state. And so it's an opportunity for us to be more competitive on the national landscape. And we think it's going to work beautifully.
I'm Christine Frizzell. President Donald Trump says the United States will be getting back money and respect once his new tariffs are implemented later this week. While questions loom about exactly which countries and what goods will be tariffed, the White House is doubling down on their use to improve the country and the economy as a whole.
This is the beginning of Liberation Day in America.
With just a couple days to go, Trump's tariff team is out in full force, laying out the case for the major changes ahead.
Tariffs are tax cuts, tariffs are jobs, tariffs are national security.
The president has threatened tariffs on agricultural products, on pharmaceuticals, plus a 25% tariff on cars and car parts imported into the United States, which he predicts will result in more car companies building cars on U.S. soil. Hyundai is just the latest foreign company to announce it will invest billions here, including a new steel manufacturing plant in Louisiana.
They're coming in because of the tariffs, the incentive, because if he doesn't, they're going to have to pay the very substantial tariffs for the privilege of selling their product in the United States.
In the short term, though, economists predict the price of a new car will rise by at least $5,000. A new Fox News poll finding it's a concern for 69% of Americans who believe tariffs will make products more expensive. President Trump telling NBC News he, quote, couldn't care less if automakers raise their prices due to new tariffs.
That is a tax. That money doesn't come falling out of the sky. That money comes because these products will go up. Americans will pay more.
The White House insisting it's about balancing a system that's been largely unfair to the United States and transformed an industry that was largely made in America to one that was largely made elsewhere.
What the Germans and the Japanese and the South Koreans are doing is they're turning this country from a manufacturing nation into an assembly nation.
A brand new CBS News YouGov poll finds that most Americans oppose the tariffs, and 64% say President Donald Trump should be far more focused on lowering prices.
We in these hot ass Texas streets, honey. Y'all know we got Governor Hot Wheels down there. Come on now. And the only thing hot about him is that he is a hot ass mess, honey.
Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has ignited a firestorm of backlash after referring to Texas Governor Greg Abbott as Governor Hot Wheels, which was a reference to the fact that he uses a wheelchair, although she now denies that. We'll get to her denial in just a minute.
Oh, come on.
I know, the denial is even worse, believe me. Okay, we'll get to that in just a second. But ironically, she did make that remark at the awards dinner for the Human Rights Campaign. This took place on Saturday. But it's going viral today. Now, Abbott, for those who don't know, and to be honest, I didn't even know the story behind why he's in a wheelchair, but he was actually paralyzed back in 1984. He was on a jog and an oak tree fell on him and paralyzed him.
That's fucked up, man.
Some of the backlash she received came in the form of Republican members of Congress basically trashing her, going after her. Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of them, saying absolutely shameful. I mean, it's hilarious coming from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has said all sorts of insidious, disgusting things about all sorts of people, but nonetheless, absolutely shameful. Jasmine Crockett is the face of the Democrat Party, and they all support her. Just let her talk, because the ads write themselves, and America finds out everything they need to know about who the Democrats really are. Now, I don't think it was a good idea for Jasmine Crockett to say it. I thought it was a gross statement. I don't think she needed to attack the fact that he's in a wheelchair. I think that's a cheap shot, and it's a lazy insult. It's also demeaning, degrading to other disabled people in this country. Abbott is a target-rich environment. There are substantive ways to attack him, political ways to attack him, without resorting to making fun of the fact that he's in a wheelchair. But nonetheless, when she was reached out to by Politico, they asked, like what's going on here. Her statement to them was that my statement speaks for itself. That was the initial response from her, right? But
But now she's realizing, okay, maybe there are some Democrats who are uncomfortable with this as well. So she released another statement. I'm going to read it verbatim. I wasn't thinking about the governor's condition. I was thinking about the planes, trains, and automobiles he used to transfer migrants into communities led by black mayors, deliberately stoking tension and fear among the most vulnerable. I don't believe that for a second.
No way.
You called him Governor Hot Wheels. In fact, let's watch it again.
We in these hot ass Texas streets, honey. Y'all know we got Governor Hot Wheels down there. Come on now. And the only thing hot about him is that he is a hot ass mess, honey.
In regard to the hot ass mess statement, she says literally the next line I said was he was a hot ass mess, referencing his terrible policies. At no point did I mention or allude to his condition. But what does Hot Wheels mean, Jasmine? Like, I can't stand the denials. I can't stand, just own it. You said it, own it. If you think it was a bad idea now that you're getting backlash, just apologize for it and everyone's gonna forget and move on. Like, why can't we just make it simple?
It's a hate crime hoax, another story, and it's very entertaining, and I can't believe the police went as far as they did to get DNA evidence from all of the people involved in this so that they could accuse this woman of putting a fake noose on her desk. Here's the quick version. She found a noose on her desk, this lady, and the cops came in and said, oh yeah, a noose on your desk? How about we get DNA from everybody involved? And they found on the noose was only her DNA, apparently. And so they're accusing her now of planting the noose on her own desk and filing a false police report. Because, ladies and gentlemen, there is no far-right white supremacy prevalent in this country. Most people just want to be left alone, and these people are evil scumbags. Now, let me just stress, I don't think all liberal leftists are doing these things, but they're more than happy to latch onto any and everything to espouse their cult-like ideology. From the Post-Millennial, Allentown, PA school employee charged for planting noose on her own desk and reporting it to the police. Initially cooperative, Ms. Brown later requested the investigation be discontinued. A Pennsylvania school employee has been charged after allegedly planting a noose on her own desk and then reporting it to law enforcement. Allentown police announced on Monday that LaTarsha Brown, a member of the Allentown School District Board of Directors, has been charged with tampering with or fabricating physical evidence and false reports to law enforcement, both misdemeanors. Allentown Police Criminal Investigation Division Lieutenant Stephen Milkovitz said during a press conference that on January 10th, 2025, around 7:11 a.m., Brown arrived at her City Hall office. At around 7:38 a.m., Brown notified local police that she had discovered what she believed to be a noose on her desk when she came in that morning. Well, authorities launched an investigation to find the person responsible, during which video surveillance and building access control records were reviewed to identify who was on the third floor where Brown worked between the time Brown left her office the night prior to when she came in. Employees were identified and interviewed and all agreed to provide DNA samples except for Mrs. Brown. Initially cooperative, she later requested the investigation be discontinued. Oh, God. Come on, Jussie Smollett 2.0. On January 14th, the noose was submitted to the PA State Crime Lab for DNA testing. 10 days later, a search warrant was approved by the Lehigh County District Attorney's Office for Brown's DNA, a sample of which was obtained the same day. Brown's DNA was submitted to compare against DNA recovered from the noose. On March 10th, Forensic DNA Division issued a report indicating that Brown's DNA matched the DNA profile obtained from the swabs of both the outer surface and inner knotted portion of the noose after it was taken apart, said Milkovitz, who added that no other DNA gathered matched. In response, charges were filed against Brown. Holy smokes. So inside, as they unraveled the noose, there was DNA. It was hers, meaning she tied it.
Dumbass. Dumbass.
Andrew McCarthy is interested in more than just a good... Listen, he's having no trouble...
Could you say it again? Logan Gominski is in the Marion County Jail in Florida after detectives say they got a tip that she was making videos involving her dog and posting them on Instagram. Oh, you nasty. Marion County is south of Gainesville and north of Orlando. An incident report says that the detectives received a tip back on January 28th that Logan Gominski posted a video on her Instagram account that showed her encouraging this dog to do things that I'm not really going to go into detail about. It's kind of gross. Actually, it's very gross. If you look at Gminski's Instagram account, she posts videos and photos of herself. But this video was cause for concern since someone turned it over to the sheriff's office. Detectives said the video in question didn't show Gminski's face, but the incident report stated, the video also shows a possible belly button piercing on the white female, which in several photographs on the defendant's Instagram page, you can see her with a navel piercing. So detectives started looking at other videos on the page to see if this video was likely Logan Gminski. They said they found other videos that showed Gminski with her dogs and that some depict her with a small brown dog, possibly a Chihuahua, that is identical to the one in the video. This dog is small and light brown with large brown ears, a white line going down the middle of his head, a white belly, and white fur that extends halfway up the dog's legs. I confirmed that the dog in the video has all these same characteristics. I also located a photograph posted on April 5th, 2024 that depicts the defendant with the same dog that is wearing the same dark-colored collar that is depicted in the video.
You are so busted.
So it's probably not every day that detectives get a video like this, or at least I really, really hope they don't get videos like this every day. So they got in touch with the tipster who submitted it to them. The detective wrote, I made phone contact with the person who submitted the tip, who requested to remain anonymous. They stated that on January 27th, 2025, they observed the aforementioned video posted on the defendant's public Instagram page, AlexGumX. They advised the post has already been deleted. However, they were able to save the video before it was deleted, and that is what they submitted to the anonymous tip. They advised they observed the defendant's Instagram page and observed photographs of the defendant with the same nails and the same dog as in the video. They described observing a post on January 27th, 2025 of the defendant's ex-boyfriend screenshotting the aforementioned video on his Instagram, tagging the defendant in it and calling the defendant disgusting.
Listen to him.
This post has also been deleted. However, they were able to screenshot the post and included that in the tip. Now, for whatever reason, there's a gap from February to March 21st. Then last Friday, detectives went to talk with Logan Gminski, and they say she fessed up. On 3/21/2025, Detective A. LaRoque and I conducted an interview with the defendant, Logan Gminski. The defendant admitted that she is a content creator, which she described as her utilizing the Fansly platform to sell photographs and videos of herself in the nude, depicting different sexual acts to users on the internet. The defendant admitted to taking the video of her engaging in a sexual act with her dog, Princeton, which she described as a brown and white Chihuahua. She advised that this was at the request of a Snapchat user named Sire, who requested she make the video and send it to him. The defendant, in return for engaging in this sexual act and recording it, was paid $500 by Sire. The defendant advised that she also made a second video containing sexual acts with a different dog, Rosie, which she described as a yellow lab. The defendant advised that the videos were still located on her cellular device, which she described as an Apple iPhone 15 Pro Max. The defendant advised the videos were transmitted over Snapchat, and she added her Snapchat username was Logan Nicole 77. Gminski, of course, was arrested and taken to jail. Gminski faces a third-degree felony charge of sexual activities involving animals. She also faces a felony charge involving recording this and transmitting it.
What a bunch of dumbasses. Yeah, really.
I want to go back to what I addressed at the outset. I mean, this was not only sloppy, it not only violated all procedures, but if this information had gotten out, American lives could have been lost. The Houthis had this information, could reposition their defensive systems. So I want to get a little more information about this. Director Gabbard, did you participate in the group chat with Secretary of Defense and other Trump senior officials discussing the Yemen war plans?
Senator, I don't want to get into the specifics.
Ma'am, were you on? You're not going to be willing to address it. So you're not, are you denying, Matt, will you answer my question, ma'am? You were not TG on this group chat?
I'm not going to get into the specifics.
So you refuse to acknowledge whether you were on this group chat?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the specifics.
Why are you going to get into the specifics? Is it because it's all classified?
Because this is currently under review by the National Security Council.
Because it's all classified? If it's not classified, share the text now.
As the White House previously stated,
is it classified or non-classified information on this text?
I can confirm.
Director Radcliffe, were you on the group chat?
Senator, I was on a signal messaging group.
So you were the John Ratcliffe on that chat?
I was.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I provide some context, Senator, to that?
Yes, but I've got a series of questions.
Well, but I think it's important because at the outset you made a couple of comments about signal messaging using encrypted apps. So that we're clear, one of the first things that happened when I was confirmed as CIA director was signal was loaded onto my computer at the CIA, as it is for most CIA officers. One of the things that I was briefed on very early, Senator, was by the CIA records management folks about the use of signal as a permissible work use. It is. That is a practice that preceded the current administration to the Biden administration.
Director Ratcliffe, I've got a series of questions. If you're making the statement, if you're making the statement, the signal is a secure channel.
No, can I answer that? It is
I've got a series of
end-to-end decryption. So to finish,
I understand encryption.
It is permissible to use to communicate and coordinate for work purposes, provided, Senator, that any decisions that are made are also recorded through formal channels. Right. So those were procedures that were implemented. My staff implemented those processes, followed those processes, complied with those processes, and finally, just please. So my communications, to be clear, in a signal message group were entirely permissible and lawful and did not include classified information.
Well, we will make that determination, because if it's not classified, share the text with the committee.
Sharp questions from Senate Intelligence Committee Democrats Tuesday for members of the Trump administration intelligence team.
Director Radcliffe, this was a huge mistake, correct?
No.
The hearing the day after The Atlantic reported that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz convened a text conversation with top U.S. officials earlier this month to discuss strikes on Houthi militants in Yemen. Atlantic editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg was accidentally added to the chain, which used the app Signal.
People who care about security, they use Signal. What it does is it encodes the message that you're sending in transit. So if it happened to be intercepted by someone who shouldn't have it, it would be scrambled and useless to them.
Signal is an encrypted messaging app used by journalists and government officials around the world because of its added security, and its code open for independent experts to scrutinize for vulnerabilities. Use of Signal is not unique to the Trump White House. The Biden administration routinely used it to discuss logistics planning, for example. Career national security officials note having sensitive conversations on an unclassified platform risks exposing the information to foreign hackers. Bree Fowler, who covers cybersecurity for CNET, says despite the app's high security standards, the government should look at whether the threshold is high enough for national security conversations.
You know, using something that is more for consumers and industry may not be what they should be doing. You would think the government would have some kind of proprietary app that they would use instead.
Unfortunately, all of this good is happening for our country. This administration is working hard on behalf of the American public every day, but the mainstream media continues to be focused on a sensationalized story from the failing Atlantic magazine that is falling apart by the hour. Here are the facts. The National Security Advisor has taken responsibility for this matter, and the National Security Council immediately said, alongside the White House counsel's office, that they are looking into how a reporter's number was inadvertently added to this messaging thread. We have said all along that no classified material was sent on this messaging thread. There were no locations, no sources or methods revealed, and there were certainly no war plans discussed. The Atlantic has even admitted this themselves. Their release of these internal messages validates the truth, which we have been saying all along. If this story proves anything, it proves that Democrats and their propagandists in the mainstream media know how to fabricate, orchestrate, and disseminate a misinformation campaign quite well. And there's arguably no one in the media who loves manufacturing and pushing hoaxes more than Jeffrey Goldberg. Goldberg is an anti-Trump hater. He is a registered Democrat. Goldberg's wife is also a registered Democrat and a big Democrat donor who used to work under who? Hillary Clinton. This is the same Jeffrey Goldberg who infamously lied about weapons of mass destruction to get us into the Iraq War, which cost trillions of dollars and thousands of American soldiers. And how else has Goldberg discredited himself? By absurdly claiming that President Trump was Vladimir Putin during the 2016 campaign, by peddling the Russia, Russia, Russia hoax that tried to hijack President Trump's first term, by inventing the suckers and losers hoax to help Joe Biden in the 2020 election, by peddling a hoax about President Trump involving Gold Star families to help Kamala Harris in the 2024 election, which our campaign at the time vigorously denied. Jeffrey Goldberg didn't care. There's more, but we don't have all day, and we can now add the Signal hoax to this very long list.
After repeatedly saying there was no classified information on the Signal text thread where specific plans for a U.S. attack in Yemen were discussed.
There was no classified information, as I understand it.
Nobody's texting war plans.
There was no intelligence information.
The Atlantic editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg, the journalist added to the chat by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, released a transcript of the text messages that showed Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth detailing military plans. In one text, Hegseth gives a timeline of the attack and details which fighter jets would be used. The Pentagon's own definition of what is classified includes disclosure of significant military plans or intelligence operations. Goldberg said after the administration's denials, it was time to let the public see the text for themselves.
What are they arguing, that an attack is different than a war? They put operational details of a forthcoming attack on a terrorist organization into Signal, into a Signal chat that included phone numbers that they didn't recognize.
Two top national security officials who were also on the text thread in the hot seat for a second day on Capitol Hill, maintaining nothing classified was shared.
The conversation was candid and sensitive, but as the President National Security Advisor stated, no classified information was shared.
Democrats demanding answers and firings.
No acceptance of responsibility. Excuse after excuse after excuse. Secretary Hegseth, who undoubtedly transmitted classified, sensitive operational information via this chain, must resign immediately.
Republicans now weighing in. Congressman Don Bacon telling NBC News, quote, "The White House is in denial that this was not classified or sensitive data. They should just own up to it and preserve credibility." And this afternoon, Senator Roger Wicker, the chair of the Armed Services Committee, saying the information was so sensitive,
I would have wanted it classified.
And he and Democrat Jack Reed are asking the Trump administration to expedite an inspector general report into the controversial group chat.
And while lawmakers here on Capitol Hill demand accountability, it is important to note that Michael Waltz, who is the National Security Advisor, said in an interview that he takes full responsibility for adding Jeffrey Goldberg, the Atlantic journalist, to the Signal chat, but Waltz claims that he doesn't know Goldberg or have his number.
Breaking news. U.S. officials now tell CNN that the text messages sent on Signal discussing battle plans to strike Houthi targets in Yemen, that those texts may have caused the U.S. long-term damage to gather intelligence on the group. CNN's Katie Bo-Lillis is here with us with this new reporting. Katie Bo, what are you hearing?
Yeah, John, so up until now, we've been talking about Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's texts to this Signal thread, talking about operational details of these strikes against the Houthis as really sort of the most concerning information that was made public that would normally be very, very classified under sort of normal U.S. government procedures. But my colleague Zach Cohen and I talked to a number of current and former U.S. officials who said there were two other texts in this thread from other officials that were equally concerning for slightly different reasons. One of them was from CIA Director John Ratcliffe, who, in the part of the discussion about whether or not to delay these strikes, sends a text to the group where he says, look, if we delay, and I'll quote, that will give the CIA better time to, quote, better identify better starting points for coverage on Houthi leadership. This pretty clearly, according to our sources, indicates that the CIA was doing overhead surveillance on Houthi targets. This is not something that is in and of itself surprising, but offering the Houthis sort of a clear breadcrumb to figure out how the U.S. was surveilling them might allow them to avoid that surveillance in the future. Then in a second text from National Security Advisor Michael Waltz later in the thread, he tells the group after the strikes are done that the U.S., quote, had positive ID of a particular senior Houthi leader, quote, walking into his girlfriend's building. This, again, really kind of draws a roadmap for Houthi militants in terms of how the U.S. was conducting surveillance on their movements, on their leadership, again, making it easier for Houthi leaders to potentially avoid that kind of surveillance in the future. This is why, according to our sources, this kind of information is normally kept deeply, deeply classified. Now, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, as well as the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and other senior Trump administration officials really emphasizing no sources and methods in here, nothing classified. According to our sources, not only is that a bit unlikely, but maybe is a semantic debate at the end of the day. As one of our sources put it, the Houthis have always been difficult to track. Now you just highlight for them that they're in the crosshairs, John.
And I listened to the radio, and the only radio station I could get that had news was public radio. So I listened to as many hours of public radio as anyone on this panel, I can assure you. And it was a great service. That was 30 some years ago. Today, in that same remote area, I mean, you've got Sirius XM, you've got podcasts, there's internet access now, there's a whole menu of media options now. So, but over time, and I still occasionally listen to NPR because I just want to hear what they have to say, and I don't even recognize the station anymore. It's not news. I feel like it's propaganda. I feel like there's disinformation every time I listen to NPR. And, you know, a media entity like MSNBC or Huffington Post that, in my opinion, consistently spews disinformation, they can do that. They're a private company. But NPR gets federal funds. And you know, I have a problem with that. Because if people in Alaska, if all they have is public radio, then all they know is what these headlines say. And they're wrong about COVID-19. And the headlines are in the background. I don't have time to go over all these headlines that are wrong. About Russian collusion, wrong. Wrong. About the Hunter Biden laptop, wrong. And then there's a story about me. And part of what we went through on this committee during the Biden investigation, which, by the way, ended with Joe Biden's last act as President of the United States, pardoned his entire family preemptively for an 11-year period, which just so happened to be the 11-year period that this committee investigated the Bidens, that we had subpoenaed bank records. I don't think NPR reported about the pardons, but they reported a lot about how there was no evidence of any wrongdoing and things that just weren't true. In fact, there's a story, NPR, lawmaker leading Hunter Biden House investigation accused of owning a shell company. Well, that's me. Ms. Mayor, are you familiar with that story that NPR wrote about me at the height of the Biden investigation when you all were disputing every aspect of our investigation that is 100% factual? We have hundreds of pages of evidence, hundreds of pages of bank records, hundreds of pages of emails. Do you remember the story that NPR wrote about me saying I had a shell company?
Congressman, I was not at NPR at the time, and I'm unfamiliar with the story.
Where do you get your sources on something like that? That's a very serious accusation because we're investigating a president and his family who had 28 shell companies. I have an LLC, had 5 properties in it. It's in my financial disclosure form. I've gone into great detail, given lots of interviews. But people that listen to NPR, they're totally disinformed on the truth. And you know, I have a problem with that because you get federal funds. And I do believe there was a role for public radio 30 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. But because of technology today, I don't think there's a role for public radio anymore. And I think you've abused the privilege that you had with receiving federal funds. Because these headlines here are not true. This is disinformation on some huge topics. Do you want to dispute anything that I said in the remaining 30 seconds?
Thank you, Congressman. First of all, I want to recognize your concerns. One of the first things that I did in coming in May was to beef up our editorial standards. I directed my editor-in-chief, who, by the way,
why is NPR even doing editorials?
I'm so sorry.
Even do editorials?
I don't mean editorial in terms of opinion editorial.
Do you even need opinion? What does it matter with the opinion? If you're a federally funded entity that's supposed to provide the news, can you not provide the news?
Of course,
fair and balanced?
Of course, Congressman. I mean, editorial standards for our journalism was to beef up our editorial practices, bringing in more editors to make sure that we have more points of view reflected in every story. I've engaged in a number of actions trying to address
and my
some of
time's
these
expired.
concerns.
I've lost confidence in public radio. I don't think, Madam Chair, they should get a penny of federal funds.
Ms. Maher, who is Uri Berliner?
Mr. Berliner is a former senior editor.
That's all?
A former senior business editor for NPR.
How long do you work at NPR?
I believe he was there just over 25 years.
25 years? Award-winning journalist? Did he win any awards?
Our time did not
Peabody
overlap.
Award? That's pretty important, isn't it?
That is, absolutely.
So pretty distinguished journalist, right?
Certainly.
And he wrote a long story about what you do at NPR. Is NPR biased?
Congressman, I have never seen any instance of political bias determining editorial decisions. No.
Well, Mr. Berliner, in his story last year, wrote, in the D.C. area, editorial positions at NPR. He said he found 87 registered Democrats, 0 Republicans. Is that accurate?
We do not track the numbers or the voter registration, but I find that
was award-winning journalist who worked 25 years at NPR, Mr. Berliner, was he lying when he wrote that?
I am not presuming such. I just we don't track that information about our journalists.
87 to 0, and you're not biased?
I think that is concerning if those numbers are accurate.
It's concerning. I mean, it wasn't 44-43. It wasn't 60-27. It wasn't 70-17. It wasn't even 80-7. It was 87 Democrats, 0 Republicans, and you say NPR is not biased.
There's a hearing happening on Capitol Hill right at this very moment. The House DOGE panel is questioning NPR and PBS executives over their alleged bias and whether taxpayers should be funding their newsrooms. The CEO of NPR made a revealing admission during the hearing. Let's listen.
Now you are here managing NPR, which is in part federally funded. Can we expect that you will bring the same lack of reverence for truth to your management of NPR?
Thank you, Congressman. First of all, I do want to say that NPR acknowledges that we were mistaken in failing to cover the Hunter Biden laptop story more aggressively and sooner. Our current editorial leadership.
In Wuhan?
We recognize that we were reporting at the time, but we acknowledge that the new CIA evidence is worthy of coverage and have covered it.
Uri Berliner, a former NPR employee, is arguing that the news outlet should not take the federal funds.
He writes for the Free Press, the broadcaster needs to stop pretending it's a network for all of America and become the progressive institution it truly wants to be. Berliner also points out that NPR says federal funding only accounts for just 5% of annual revenues anyway. So that was an important admission from Catherine Maher, someone I've criticized a great deal over the years. She's kind of one of those anti-disinformation thinkers who seems to not have as much reverence as I would like for the First Amendment, which does protect incorrect speech, false speech, alleged misinformation, because, as was the case with NPR's coverage of these two important stories, the Hunter Biden laptop and the lab leak, they initially succumbed to the popular mainstream expert consensus that that the Hunter Biden laptop story was fake or some kind of Russian hoax. That is not the case. And then also that you are a racist conspiracy theorizer for thinking that maybe COVID came from a lab. Now we know that that is the leading explanation of at least 3 different government agencies. It shows that just succumbing to groupthink can have downsides. Just automatically believing or repurposing whatever the elite progressive consensus is can be damaging and erodes these institutions as kind of neutral arbiters that are getting taxpayer funding. Now, I would absolutely strip them of taxpayer funding. You're not going to be surprised to hear me say that at all. And then they can be as progressive or single-minded as they want to be, but as long as they're on the taxpayer the grain dole, I think they have some obligation to be a little bit more neutral in their coverage.
Well, I agree with the employee who said, what do we need those funds for? It's 5% of our funding. Let's just be who we really want to be. Everybody, to me, it brings up what's going on over at Colombia. In exchange for that $400 million, the things that they're caving to are so horrifying to me. Number one, first of all, this business about in Colombia that they need to fight anti-Semitism. This kind of behavior will actually make anti-Semitism increase, I believe. But the worst part of it is that in exchange for that $400 million, they will now take into academic receivership 3 of the departments at Columbia, both Middle Eastern Studies, African Studies, and Asian Studies. That is such a complete surrender of academic freedom. So here, just don't take the government's money. Just don't. I would bet for that $400
Hell yeah.
million, you could have Columbia alum who could come together, some of those guys within 2 or 3 weeks, they'd have your $400 million. So if the government wants to tell NPR what to put for their 5% of their funding, then I say, I agree with the guy who says, then let the government keep its money on that case.
PBS and NPR were under fire yesterday on Capitol Hill. The D.O.G.E subcommittee held a hearing to discuss whether the 2 networks deserve government funding, since Republicans say the outlets are too left-leaning.
NPR's CEO made an interesting admission and also walked back some past statements. Let's watch.
Let me ask you, why did you call President Trump a fascist and a deranged racist sociopath in 2020?
Congressman, I appreciate the opportunity to address this. I regret those tweets. I would not tweet them again today. They represented a time where I was reflecting on something that I believe that the president had said rather than who he is. I don't presume that anyone is a racist.
You don't believe anyone is a racist?
I don't start by presuming anyone is a racist, sir.
Former senior business editor at NPR, Uri Berliner, has some advice for the outlet. He wrote a piece in the Free Press titled, "NPR should refuse to take federal funds. The broadcaster needs to stop pretending it's a network for all of America and become the progressive institution it truly wants to be." Berliner had spoken out last year about how NPR's staunch left-leaning editorial stance led to the outlet losing its way. Joining us now to discuss more is Berliner himself. Welcome to Rising.
Hi.
Great to have you with us. I really appreciated the things you've written for the Free Press about your time at NPR and the biases that you say you witnessed in terms of failing to cover 2 of the stories, in fact, that were mentioned at that hearing. First, I want to get your reaction to what you saw in the hearing yesterday. It seemed to me like Catherine Maher was quite aware of the heightened scrutiny she's getting and wanted to backpedal from a lot of statements she'd made in her personal life on social media. What was your takeaway from what you saw?
Well, I think what you saw was the Republicans certainly aggressively interrogating and then sometimes attacking NPR, less so PBS, and the Democrats really talking about children's television mostly, and Big Bird and Elmo, and the coverage for rural stations. I think, the heart of it was the back and forth between the Republicans and Catherine Maher. And, she did acknowledge that NPR had failed to adequately cover the Hunter Biden laptop story. I was happy to see that. And, she did struggle to reconcile, to explain away some of her social media history. I think there was pretty tough questioning there from the Republicans, and that was I think the toughest part of the hearing for Maher.
And your point is that, look, she, and I agree with this. She has First Amendment rights too. She has free speech. She can spout off on whatever she thinks, and I can criticize it or disagree with it, as can Republicans. But is someone of this mindset the right person to run a news organization that receives federal funding and thus, we would probably argue, has some obligation to, if not exactly represent the views of all Americans, however crazy or extreme, to at least have some level of understanding or like social ability to relate to and discuss in a not so extreme or biased way. And I think that's what she failed to do, versus her, given her history of tweeting. And then you say, like, if that's going to be the case, then she can just be the head of a left-wing organization that is not taxpayer supported.
Right. I mean, I agree with you completely. I think, given that NPR has always and increasingly has been under scrutiny for perceptions that it leans left, to hire someone with that very hyper-progressive history of social media that sort of stands out. I think that's probably not the best way to lead NPR into the future. And my point is that I think it just would be healthier all around if NPR said, look, the amount of federal funding we receive is fairly minimal. We're going to give it up. We're going to do something that no one does in American life, which just says, no, we don't need the federal funds, and go off and raise money from loyal listeners, big donors, left-leaning foundations, and say, we have a progressive outlook. That's who we are. We are, we're going to try and report fairly, but we acknowledge what we are. I think it would be better all around. They wouldn't have to deal with Marjorie Taylor Greene and a kind of really uncomfortable days like yesterday, and there would be a new direction for NPR.
Privatizing Social Security, bringing in private equity and tech people, and giving Elon Musk and his little crowd a role have in all of that.
I've never thought about privatizing. It's not a word that anybody's ever talked to me about, and I don't see this institution as anything other than a government agency that gets run for the benefit of the American public.
President Trump's nominee to run Social Security, Frank Bizignano, is testifying on and in front of the Senate Finance Committee about his plans for the agency. Joining me now to discuss what's at stake for Social Security in the coming years are Yahoo Finance's own Ben Werschel and Carrie Hannon. Ben, let's start with the policy. What are some of Trump's priorities for Social Security?
Sure thing. Good to be with you. So on the campaign trail, Trump offered a bit of a mixed message on Social Security. He was the candidate who was not going to touch Social Security, but he was also the candidate who was going to save it. So we can get into kind of why that's a contradiction. Since the election, as everyone knows, he's very much touched it. Elon Musk in particular and his D.O.G.E efforts have really integrated themselves into the Social Security system and made a lot of changes on things like phone service, field offices. They're trying to, in the name of government efficiency. The current acting commissioner is a guy named Leland Dudek, who has said that he's talked about even shutting down some agency functions as he stands off with judges on a bunch of legal issues. Frank Bizignano, as the clip you played there, has tried to offer a kind of more calming message so far today here in front of the Senate Finance Committee. He's presented himself as an efficiency expert, but also a customer service expert. His background is in payments. So he's trying to kind of offer a message that he wants the phone services to continue, which is a major issue for Social Security recipients, even as we're seeing all these changes there. The hearing is ongoing, but that's what his message has been so far.
And Carrie, DOGE head Elon Musk has repeatedly accused Social Security of widespread fraud. So what are the source of those concerns?
Yeah, Brad, he has been obsessed with this idea that dead people are getting Social Security payments, which is simply all of the experts I have spoken to said this is absolutely untrue. There's absolutely no any facts to back this up. There's a very tiny percentage of Americans who are over 100 who do get Social Security payments, maybe 0.1%. It's a very tiny percentage. And he seems to have that. What I'm hearing is that he's completely misread the data systems and his team in Social Security. There's several different computer systems that work there that they're reading numbers from one database that is just not, these are numbers that they're pulling from people who had Social Security accounts from the beginning of time. So they're like 1 million people have had unique Social Security numbers. And because of when they passed away, when they died, their record of death was not recorded because there weren't electronic records back then. So there's a confusion over the data that they're misreading these. And in fact, that's not where there is obviously some missteps that do happen, but the majority of those are people who are overpaid based on inaccurate work records and so forth, and that has been being taken care of. But this material is reviewed over and over again, and the experts I speak to say that this is completely outlandish, what he says.
And so, Ben, there's also a funding crisis coming for Social Security.
For sure.
What do we need to know about that?
Yeah, so the DOGE promise to a certain extent here is that there is this massive fraud and abuse in the system, which, as Carrie just laid out, there really isn't evidence for. And we've had a lot of evidence reporting in the last week even that DOGE is getting there trying to find this fraud, and they're just not finding it. It was notable that Frank Bisignano embraced a current projection of 1% fraud, which is not nothing, but it's definitely not enough to change a fiscal trajectory, which has a lot of problems here. The Social Security Administration has laid out that by 2033 or 2035, depending on how they manage things, insolvency is there, and what that means is benefit cuts if no action is taken. Basically, just the numbers don't add up, whatever you do there, and it means it's about 79% of benefits would be paid out versus the 100% that are paid now. So that's a cut across everyone's Social Security checks and the benefits they receive. The question is how to solve this. History, there's a lot of examples from history. The problem is they are very unpopular. It's basically, do you increase payroll taxes or do you increase the retirement age? Nobody likes either of those things. The DOGE promise here is that we're going to find all the ways to fraud to do this, but there's just no evidence that they're getting there yet. Either way, the fiscal trajectory is very clear that by next decade, there's going to be a problem with Social Security's funding.
Joining me now is Kansas Congressman Ron Estes. He's the chairman of the House Social Security Subcommittee. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. Well, Democrats claim that Republicans are going to cut Social Security to pay for President Trump's agenda. I wanted to get your take on the overspending or the waste that is present in Social Security, because I know that you're not looking to cut the muscle here. But the Democrats need to know what you're going to do, because they're spreading this idea that you're going to be cutting into the muscle. Washington Senator Patty Murray wrote this: the Republican policy on Social Security is to create so much red tape for you that it's harder to get the benefits you've paid into your entire career. Meanwhile, they'll keep lying about fraud and stealing from you to pass trillions in tax cuts for billionaires. Congressman, she's talking about you and your colleagues. Are you lying about this?
Well, that's just not true. I mean, when you look at what's going on with what we're trying to accomplish, the DOGE effort, as well as what we've started now on Social Security Subcommittee, is looking at how do we eliminate this waste and improper payments. Every dollar we save on waste and improper payments is a dollar that's available to pay legitimate beneficiaries. So we want to make sure that happens and that legitimate beneficiaries get their money. Anybody that says Republicans are trying to cut Social Security, they're just not telling the truth.
Army officials say a search operation is underway for 4 U.S. soldiers in Lithuania. The Army says they were conducting scheduled tactical training there. Let's bring in ABC News senior Pentagon reporter Louis Martinez for more. Louis, they were there training, so what happened?
Diane, what we know is this was a scheduled training yesterday afternoon in Lithuania. There are about 20,000 American troops on the eastern flank of NATO, and that includes the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. And so the scheduled practice was taking place on a training ground there, and we are learning from the Lithuanian Armed Forces that this involved a tracked vehicle. They said that potentially a site of interest had been located that they're going to be exploring to see if they can find these soldiers and that tracked vehicle. But we spoke with a U.S. official who said that they have not located the soldiers as of now. So the search continues, and again, it highlights that the presence of these American troops who were sent there over the last 3 years in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine as a deterrence factor to prevent Russia from thinking about going beyond Ukraine's borders. And it's incidents like this that highlight that there are always dangers in any kind of a training scenario. It doesn't necessarily have to involve combat. It can just even be a training situation that is risky.
I did want to share some file video with you as we are now learning that 3 U.S. soldiers have been found dead after disappearing during a training mission in Lithuania. 3 of 4 U.S. Army soldiers who disappeared during a training mission in Lithuania last week have been found dead. But the search is ongoing for the 4th soldier. That is according to the Army. Their identities not released at this hour. Now, we did want to share the very latest as the U.S. Army is continuing to investigate. This happened last week when 4 U.S. soldiers disappeared while training in Lithuania. They now say that 3 of the 4 confirmed dead, but the search is ongoing for the 4th U.S. soldier. The U.S. Army said that the Hercules armored vehicle that the 4 U.S. soldiers were in during a training exercise had been found submerged in a body of water. It said recovery efforts at the time last week were underway by U.S. Army and Lithuanian armed forces and civilian agencies. The soldiers were all from the 1st Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division, and they were conducting tactical training when they disappeared.
Ross Coulthart, News Nation special correspondent, host of Reality Check. Ross, as you know, was the one who blew this wide open with David Grush a couple of years ago. Good on you, sir, to be here with us tonight. So you were just watching all that with me. I spoke to Burleson Congressman a few hours ago. What'd you make of what you just heard there, Ross? And do you think it was a smart move for the congressman to do this?
Firstly, good evening, Blake. I think it's a great move, and I really commend the congressman for bringing David on board. I know David's excited to get his teeth into the issue, and there's nothing quite like being in the Congress to be able to get in the ear of different Congress people and indeed senators to try and word them up to know what to ask for. One of the complications with this whole UAP issue is that we're up against a very determined disinformation campaign where, frankly, some people in the Pentagon and the intelligence community, not all, by the way, some people are very open, some people don't want this story told. And David's there to tell this story because, frankly, he's a patriot. As Representative Burleson there explained, David loves his country. And I notice Representative Burleson serves, as well as the Oversight Committee, he also serves on the D.O.G.E committee. You know, he's very much in favour of trimming government budgets. If it's true that there is this unaccountable multi-billion-dollar legacy program that's retrieving craft and spending billions of dollars of your taxpayer money on it, I would have thought D.O.G.E would want to have a look at it too, and I'm sure David Grush will be helping him.
Yeah, that's why I asked him about the current administration, right? Because when all this started, it was a different administration. So I hear you and your view of, you know, maybe there's some folks inside the Pentagon who don't want information getting out there. Well, now there's a new Secretary of Defense and a new Commander-in-Chief, right? So that's why I was getting to him. Does any of this change now that Pete Hegseth is running the show there? And I wonder if there is going to be an aha moment, Ross, in your view, now that Grush is on board.
We certainly hope so. I can tell you, Donald Trump has said things in the past that indicate he's open to declassifying UAP files. But one thing he has not done, he has signed executive orders for Epstein, JFK, MLK, RFK, and he's ordered those files to be progressively declassified. He hasn't done that yet with the UAP files. And that's a huge question mark. Why has the president not followed up with his promise to be more open with disclosure on UAPs? Have the intelligence community got the president around their little finger? That's the issue.
The FBI's Russian investigation, known as Crossfire Hurricane, is getting a closer look. President Trump recently ordered documents related to the 2016 probe to be fully declassified.
Between 2016 and 2017, the agency investigated whether members of Trump's first campaign colluded with Russia in the run-up to the 2016 election. Ultimately, then Special Counsel Robert Mueller concluded there was evidence of Russian meddling, but no actual collusion with Trump's campaign.
Trump has demanded all documents be made public. Here to dive in is Grey Zone journalist Aaron Mate, who covered Russiagate extensively. Welcome back to Rising.
Good to be here.
So we've heard lots of promises of lots of disclosures of documents relating to all sorts of things that are interesting to people on the right, people on the left, people outside the mainstream media. And I think it's fair to say there's been a lot of disappointment so far. What's going on with this story?
Let's first of all recall that this entire thing was a scam. The collusion aspect was a scam. We know that now. Hillary Clinton's campaign paid Christopher Steele to come up with this ludicrous dossier of conspiracy theories about Trump and Russia. No one takes that seriously anymore. People who defend that aspect of the probe still want to cling to other claims to argue that this was credible. The whole thing was a farce, including the allegations of Russian meddling, which also comes from the Clinton campaign as well. This allegation that Russia hacked the DNC and gave the emails to WikiLeaks and launched a massive social media campaign. All the available evidence undermines that as well. So it's been hard to get accountability for this because so many people were implicated, not just the Democratic Party, but also the intelligence agencies that were complicit in this, and much of the corporate media, which acted as stenographers for the Russiagate fraudsters. And even Trump, in his first term, when he tried to declassify some documents, got heavy pushback from members of his own administration, people like William Barr, because they also did not want to embarrass their colleagues inside the intelligence community. So getting sunlight on this scandal has been very, very difficult. Now Trump is promising a new release of documents, as you mentioned, but even what he's promising is not actually very interesting. He's talking about declassifying this binder, the so-called binder, that he tried to have released in the final days of his first term. But what we actually know about that binder is low-hanging fruit. It's basically materials related to the FBI's reliance on Christopher Steele for its surveillance warrant applications of Trump campaign volunteer Carter Page, and text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who were two FBI officials that were heavily implicated in the Russiagate scam. We know by now that the FBI relied on Christopher Steele. We know that Lisa Page and Peter Strzok were biased against Trump. This is all very low-hanging fruit. So even when this comes out, I'm not expecting something very significant. The real materials have yet to be released, and I've yet to see any serious commitment by Trump and his team to releasing those materials.
So, hey, Robbie, what's on your radar today?
Well, Marianne, another week, another reality check for the mainstream media. You know their game by now. We're constantly being informed by the purveyors of elite wisdom that the consensus on Donald Trump is turning decidedly negative, hostile. Voters who reluctantly backed him are turning on him in droves. His election mandate is crumbling. Democrats are surging as the resistance has plenty of fodder, with Trump and his cabinet, his chief advisor, Elon Musk, doing all these unpopular things. It's only a matter of time. Any moment now, this new reality is going to catch up with the administration. Orange man bad. Everybody knows it, right? Right? Surely the American people are coming around to the view that our mainstream media watchdogs have held from the beginning, that Trump is unfit for office and a unique danger. I mean, just look, things are so chaotic, aren't they? Aren't people dissatisfied? Aren't they regretting the choice they made last November to send Donald Trump back to the White House? Well, here's the answer. Newsflash. No. No. Trump remains defiantly popular. In fact, by some measures, he's more popular now than he has ever been since he became a partisan political figure. His net favorability right now is higher than it was a few weeks ago when he was reelected. The American people like what they are getting from the Trump administration. They like it. They really like it. But don't take my word for it. Take it from Harry Enton, CNN's pollster. This is becoming a recurring segment, and it is oh so delicious. Enton is a down-the-line numbers guy who just reports the information he gets, often to his stunned colleagues. Well, we were treated to yet another example of this. Let's watch.
I think sometimes it's important to do a little bit of reality check and take a little different spin at the numbers. I'm going to do that right here because all we talk about is how unpopular Donald Trump is. But in reality, he's basically more popular than he was at any point in term number one, and more popular than he was when he won election back in November of 2024. What are we talking about? His net favorable rating right now comes in at -4 points. Compare that to where he was when he won in November of 2024, when he was at -7 points, or March of 2017, when he was at -10 points. So when you compare Trump against himself, he's actually closer to the apex than he is to the bottom of the trough. And of course, that's so important because Donald Trump, historically speaking, has had his numbers underestimated. So I think it's very important to compare him to himself to understand he's actually more popular now than he was when he won, or certainly where he was at this point back in his first term. The bottom line is Trump is more towards the ceiling than he is towards the floor.
So when you do that, it makes my knees hurt.
Harry goes on to explain that the numbers for Congress look much like they did when the GOP took control of and then retained the House. But look, the big thing is Trump. His net favorability is high. It's high for Trump, and it's high comparable to other presidents who then went on to win re-election, which will not be the case for Trump since he is term limited. But it goes to show you that he's on par with presidents who are doing a good enough job to survive such a referendum. Why do the media keep missing this, with the exception of Harry Enten? Why are they continuously stunned to the point where their legs are giving out, as that colleague of Harry Enten's was, when they're struck with the reality that Trump is fairly popular, at least as far as political figures go? We're a divided country, so it's not universal acclaim, certainly. It's because they reside, the media, in elite enclaves where they never have to interact with Trump voters. They don't know them. They're not in their circles. It's like that White Lotus episode from 2 weeks ago where two middle-aged women are shocked to learn that one of their best friends from high school is a Trump-supporting independent. They react with apoplexy. It's all too real. Here's another example. The New York Times recently had its 4 conservative-leaning columnists participate in a joint conversation to explain Trump's enduring appeal. Bret Stephens, David French, David Brooks, and Ross Douthat. Only one of those individuals, Ross Douthat, could be plausibly described as even mildly pro-Trump or favorably inclined to aspects of Trumpism. The rest utterly despise Trump. So much for intellectual diversity in the nation's most prestigious paper. Even their quote-unquote conservative columnists hate Trump. That sets the media apart from millions of people, millions of voters who know exactly who Trump is and what he represents and have collectively said, "Please, sir, I'd like some more." The numbers don't lie, Marianne.
Oh, yes, they do. The
you
numbers
think so?
are just the numbers. Polls don't always mean so much.
I mean, they're
By the way,
inaccurate in the way that they underrate his...
If you look at someone like Bret Stephens, I mean, he is conservative. The point there is not that even these conservatives dislike him. The real question is, why do these conservatives dislike him? By the way, you are media elite. You keep talking about this. They don't understand us.
No, I'm a working man of the people.
You are white, male, privileged, elite guy, young guy who has it all together. Talking like you are making, like you are speaking for the little guy. It's so absurd, Robbie. Anyway, all of those numbers mean we're talking about negative points, so it's less bad. And, you know, he's president of the United States, and these conversations should be so much bigger than who's up or who's down on any particular day. Our conversation should be about what's happening in the country. That's why I think it's so interesting that someone like Bret Stephens, I mean, those New York Times people that you talked about them, I don't think of those guys as exactly far left. And some of them, such as David Brooks, I think David Brooks certainly is this moderate man.
He's squishy moderate.
But his problems with Trump go deeper. His problems with Trump go into an area that all of us, no matter whether we're on the left or the right, should be questioning. You mentioned in that article, and you've said several times, of course the president won't be running again. So what do you say about the fact that the president says that he plans to run again, and he just assumes that he's putting out the dog whistle so that people in the states will start the conventions necessary? What do you think about the fact that
Trump say he's going to run?
Yeah, the president talks about running
again.
again.
Going to run again.
Pardon?
I don't.
No, of course he shouldn't run again. It is unconstitutional for him to run again.
It is. Yes, he's not.
I see. This is what I don't understand about you. I didn't understand. This is interesting to me. I don't give the Democrats a pass when I feel they're full of it.
Well, I don't give the Republicans a pass.
Why do you give him a pass when he is so obviously full of it?
I don't give them a pass. You weren't here on Monday. I did a whole radar objecting to the administration's due process-free deportations. I don't give them a pass.
Good.
I have a lot of hostile things to say about.
I wasn't here that day. I only based my information on what I experienced with you.
From Politico.
They say we dug into the polls. Democrats in Congress should be very afraid. You see, I mentioned in the previous segment that Democrats are never going to win again if Donald Trump succeeds in his efforts to require proof of citizenship for voting. But it ain't just about whether or not Donald Trump can actually make it harder for them to game the system. Everybody hates them. So Politico.com mentions that for the first time in their polling history, this is which polling? Quinnipiac. For the first time in Quinnipiac polling history, Democrats are underwater, -9 net approval, while Republicans are enjoying a 69% approval, which is absolutely crazy. Now, this is among their party. So 69% of Republicans like the Republican Party, and it's gone up. Among Democrat voters, they view the Democratic Party extremely negatively. Now, here's why I say they're never going to win. Take a look at this from Gallup. They found 22% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents in 2025 want the party to stay the same. 29% want it to be more liberal, and 45% want it to be more moderate. So the way I explain this is I combine the more liberal and stay the same in the same category. And I'll tell you why. The party is insane. The Democratic Party right now represents...
Absolutely.
They're on the wrong side of numerous 80-20 issues. That's the talking point, right? Immigration, they're on the wrong side. Transgender stuff, wrong side. So if they stay the same, the party is crazy and can't win. If they get more liberal, they're even crazier and they can't win. That means 51% of the Democratic Party wants to be crazy enough to not win ever again. and 45 are saying, please moderate. You know, I love this because it means that 45%, they're going to come knocking. They're going to say, Terrence, I don't know. The Democrats are crazy. I'm buying waffles from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, this is why President Trump won. Like I said before, there were people who I know that did not like Trump at all, would never vote for him, but they voted for him in this past election just because they thought the Democrats were so crazy.
Democrats are
crazy. And I know people who they do not like Trump as a person, but they voted for him. And this one lady said, she said, I'm gonna vote for Trump, but I'm gonna hold my nose while I'm doing it. But she still voted for him. She just couldn't believe it. She was sick to her stomach that she felt like she had to vote for him because the party that she's been supporting is absolutely insane.
They're not voting for Trump. They're voting against the Democrats.
Exactly.
Because the Democrats are completely insane. I know that the polling will tell you that this is not a major factor, but the party that says men can become women and women can become men will not win.
The Democrat Party's approval rating hitting record lows in 2 national polls this month. CNN finds only 29% of Americans have a favorable view of the Democrats, while NBC polls show that number even lower, 27%. But former Democrat vice presidential nominee Tim Walz seems to not have learned anything about November's loss. Here's his explanation on why America chose Trump.
We let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on DEI, and we let them define what woke is. We got ourselves in this mess because we weren't bold enough to stand up and say, you damn right we're proud of these policies. We're going to put them in, and we're going to execute them.
Wow, they're going to execute him. Joining me now is former advisor to the Clintons, Stagwell chairman and CEO, and the Harris Poll chairman, Mark Penn. Mark, it's great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. And you've been doing your own polling, very, very good polling. Your thoughts on what's going on with the Democrats right now?
Well, the Democrats have fallen off a cliff. I haven't seen anything like this, although you can go back to 1972 when they got one state, or 1984 when they got one state. Look, the Democratic policies really put the Democrats in a hole. And I think in retrospect, they're looking at the Biden presidency and saying, I don't know how he was president. He was weak internationally. He caused inflation at home. He left the border open. He didn't do anything about crime. I think that in retrospect, people are looking back and they're wondering, how on earth did they even vote Democratic? And that is a really big problem for this party.
And that's the game!
You've disconnected from
the hive mind. Explain.